All right. Chapter 37. Chapter 37 in one word, ma'asenu. It's our actions. It's all up to us. It's in our hands. God once revealed himself in a way, that there was no negativity, no evil by Mount Sinai. However, it came from above, and therefore it didn't have a lasting effect. It was the sin of the golden calf, and therefore dross, negativity, klipa, the shell that covers over on God's presence, is in this world. So what do we have to do through our our actions and our divine service throughout the time of exile? Exile means that God's presence is in exile. We learn about God. We have a mind's eye towards God. We have a soul that can sense, if we're more attuned to our soul than just our physical eye. Absolutely. But what the final purpose of what God created this world is that it should be a clarity in God, just like, did you hear that? I felt it too. I saw it, right? You saw it, you heard it, I felt it. And our five senses, we need to experience that also with God. And now it's concealed. Times of Mashiach will be revealed. Through our efforts, our divine service, that's what's going to make it happen. How so? Mitzvah. The mitzvah is an object that is godly. And every time we use a mitzvah object like a coin that was beforehand under klipa, and now we use it for a mitzvah, or a tefillin that was hitherto a parchment that was of klipa, didn't have a holiness in it, but we elevate it to holiness, then it becomes a mitzvah object. It becomes identified with God. Furthermore, the person who puts on the tefillin or gives a charity is now in that moment united and bound up with God. The light of God embraces the individual. The Alter Rebbe goes now further. In addition to the actual object that is holy, we get that, a holy book, a Torah scroll, a mezuzah, tefillin, right? We get that. And we get that when we put it on at that moment, our body and animal soul is... Others say they can't hear me. I don't know why. Others say volume is good. Okay. I hear myself. And perhaps pick up the volume. Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, that's interesting. There are a few people who can't hear. Okay. I don't know what to say, folks. No, they want to hear. They want to hear. Okay. Okay, it's clear all the way to Akko, Israel, so I guess it's clear. So, the Alter Rebbe now says that not only the mitzvah object is elevated from klipas noiga, from a shell that's covered and conceals God, and is now identified in totally the embodiment of the will of God, and also the individual by doing the mitzvah. But how about the food that we eat? Kosher food, of course, that we eat. Kosher food isn't holy. It is klipas noiga. It is an admixture of good and evil. Could be for good, it could be for bad, right? The fact that I eat food that gives me strength, that now I could do a mitzvah. What does that mean? You eat food, it assimilates and becomes your blood. It becomes part of you. And now, with that energy, you are learning Tanya, right? I had a coffee this morning to help my, perk me up, give me a better davening and a better capability of focusing my learning. So all of that, when I'm using it for the sake of a mitzvah, so now the food gets also transformed from the klipa, the shell that covers over it, and it is dragged up, so to speak, dragged along with the mitzvah that we do right now, doing the mitzvah of studying of Torah, and becomes elevated. What we see over here is then the things that we have in our lives, aside from the mitzvah objects and us doing the mitzvah, but the things that help us to do the mitzvah. So, for example, if you go, out there doesn't say this, but I'm giving you the example. If you're going to the hospital, which today you can't get into a hospital unless, God forbid, you need it. You shouldn't need it. But if you want to go visit somebody, right, in better times, shall we say, or in normal times, better, in normal times, so the car that you took to the hospital is a vehicle to help you do the mitzvah. The gas that you put into the car now becomes a vehicle to help you do the mitzvah. And everything that led you to do the mitzvah. So this is now incorporating a lot more of the world in being connected to the divine light, through the end goal of doing a mitzvah, whatever that mitzvah is. Again, you needed to go to synagogue. Today, synagogues are closed, but in general. So you're walking to synagogue on Shabbos, or during the week if you drive. And everything that is engaged that brings you to that moment to do the mitzvah, it now becomes your flesh and blood, that food, that engagement becomes a part of you, but everything becomes now elevated from klipas noiga, and it descends. Now, when will all of this come to a completion? When there's, Mount Sinai, there were 600,000 basic souls. When 600 souls that are general souls, that from the 600,000 there's divisions of many groups of souls, will fulfill, each of these souls will fulfill its mandate, which is 613 commandments. That's what Jewish people were given. So when we will fulfill all 613 commandments, meaning 365 negative commandments. What are they? 365 prohibitions in the Torah. We have to restrain, we have to hold back, right? Not from something that's not kosher, for example. Not kosher to eat, not kosher to say, right? Like Lashon Hara. So those represent in the physical body of the individual 365 blood vessels of the animal soul in the body. So when we restrain from bringing into the blood vessels negative vitality, right? Because when God forbid you do something wrong, so what you're doing is bringing negative vitality into the bloodstream of, right? This is a metaphor over here, right? Of the souls of the Jewish people, or of the individual, and you're bringing that vitality, so it's now being brought down rather than elevated when someone engages in a prohibition. If you restrain from the prohibition, what you're allowing is that the blood vessels that are flowing through the body to flow through properly, and that there should not be any interference with that blood flow. When we do a sin, it interferes with the blood flow, and it brings negative unclean spirit into the body. And again, this is a metaphor that we're using over here, the metaphor of the body of the soul, the individual. So again, when we restrain ourselves from doing something that is prohibition, we're allowing the proper blood flow to go through the body of the individual and to give healthy vitality. When, God forbid, we do something, a prohibition, we're introducing like a blood clot almost, right? That we're not allowing the healthy flow of the blood to give vitality to, right, our body. So again, that's a metaphor for us to understand why we need to stay away from a prohibition, because ultimately everything is a form of vitality that comes from God. Furthermore, there's 248 positive commandments. In other words, that's only allowing the flow of blood to go in the appropriate way, that there shouldn't be anything blockage, right? But then we need also to bind ourselves and to connect ourselves with God, not only to stay away from negativity, but we have to do something positive. 248 limbs of the body. Each limb needs to be connected with its source, with God, to bind ourselves entirely with God, right? So those limbs to be perfect unity, meaning that we have to fulfill each and every one of the commandments that will then unite and be bound up with God. In what way? To be bound up like a chariot is bound up with its driver, meaning the chariot has no will of its own and it's driven, it's directed totally by its rider. Well, when we do the will of God, 248 positive commandments, and we're directed only by the divine will of God, then we're completely united and bound up with the divine will, with God himself, as a result of that submission to the divine will. We're in the middle of a thought, which will continue. So, just to sum up over here, and the correlation to what's going on with Corona, wow. To sum up, there is much of our world that can engage in being elevated to the divine. Anything and everything in our world that we use to the end goal of doing a mitzvah, and that's why we engage in it. Doesn't have to necessarily be consciously. When you fill up your gasoline tank in order to go to buy your food for Shabbos, it doesn't necessarily mean you have that. I'm doing this in order to. It's not about conscious awareness is good, but it's about more the reality. What are you living for? Are you living for your own pleasure? Are you living to do a mitzvah? So if that's what you're living for, and that's what your end game and end result and what you're motivated by, so therefore all those things that help you to do the mitzvah are incorporated and elevated. Of course, they have to be not of a prohibition. So a Jew can't say, well, I'm eating something not kosher, but it's giving me vitality in order that I could now go visit the sick, or that I could go now pray. Doesn't work. Because that is that is bound up and cannot be elevated. The only thing that can be elevated is something that is an admixture of good and evil in it, which is klipas noiga. Klipa, the shell, but there's some good in it. The good is kind of lost in it, and that's why most money is not used for charity. Most money is just used for, self-indulgence. Most leather is not used for a mitzvah, but used for self-indulgence. But we here are not that way because we're learning Tanya and we know better. That yes, we use leather for things like leather shoes. But that could be, I'm buying these leather shoes for Shabbos. Because Shabbos, you're supposed to dress nicely. So now it becomes a vehicle for something greater. Now, we can fool ourselves, obviously, but the truth is we're not going to be so pure. But the fact that this is the truth, that we can have that leather pair of shoes in order to beautify our Shabbos, the fact that we're mindful of that, the fact that we might also like it from our animal soul, okay, well, we got work left to do on ourselves. But that's okay. But that we have this awareness that these leather shoes is really to serve God. This food that I'm eating is to serve God. That's amazing. That's amazing that the whole world around me can now become that vehicle. So I got to be careful. I got to stay away from those things that will refrain from the 365 prohibitions that bring things into klipa's complete unholy, unhealthy klipa shell that's got no good in it at all, right? So I got to stay away from that which is not kosher, not just in food, but in every other way. So that way the blood flow will go throughout the body in a healthy way. And then, but that's not enough, because then I got to do good, because I've got to also connect and unite with God, that every limb of my body should be in a positive way connected with the divine, with God himself. And that's why we have 248 limbs of the body, because every part of me has to be connected with every part of the divine. So every mitzvah is a particular, unique divine connection that I have with the Almighty. Now, how's this got to do with Corona? Well, very clear. What is Corona doing to our system inside? It is wreaking havoc, right? It's not allowing the proper blood flow to go healthily. There's obstructions that it creates. I mean, ultimately, everything will lead to an obstruction of the proper blood flow, right? If you, through the virus, ultimately, it affects, the organs to the blood. And it's that negative force that we need to get rid of. That's why we have to do what we got to do. Not allow that negative force to have anything physically negative to us. And here we understand that its counterpart in the spiritual realm is, I got to be careful that I shouldn't have any negative forces in my life of the prohibitions. Right? It's not enough just to do good. It's not enough just to, I'll be charitable, I'll pray and I will study Torah all the time. Can't say that. There's also 365 prohibitions, so we have to be careful to allow the blood flow to, again, it's a metaphor over here, the blood to flow freely without obstructions. I could unite with God, but if the blood ain't flowing freely, then, the end isn't good. So spiritually, I need to refrain from the negative things that we need to refrain from. And at the same time, I need to unite with God. We have both the negative and the positive here. So we need to do the good. So what does that mean here? We need to reach out to others. We need to celebrate this Shabbos. Everybody, we have to keep the Shabbos. Well, every Jew has to keep the Shabbos. Okay? We have to keep this Shabbos, every Jew. Please pass it on to others. Light Shabbos candles at the appropriate time, ladies. Have your food, whatever it is. So on and so forth. This is what we need to do. So on Shabbos, excuse me, I don't have a cold. I don't have a virus. I mean, at least that I know of. I have no symptoms, at least. So don't worry. I'm thank God. But I thank you all for your prayers, and as many of you have pointed out many different times, appreciate it immensely. So we need to recognize that we need both aspects in our lives. Staying away from evil and doing good in order to be healthy. And Shabbos has both aspects. It has the aspect of Shamor, is Yom Shabbos, guard and heed the day of Shabbos, which is staying away from the negativity, from the 39 malachas, work things that we're not allowed to do. And Zachor is Yom Shabbos Kache. And remember the holy day of Shabbos and sanctify it. All right, folks. I'm sorry that many of you wrote different things, and I don't have the opportunity right now to either address it or respond to it. I do thank you, though, for all the things that you do write, and all the good wishes and so on. I'm going to have a Shabbos drasha that I'm going to say tonight. It will not be, well, I don't know if it'll be on Chabad.org, but it will definitely be on Chabad ZK on Facebook, or my personal Facebook. You'll see it there too. Rabbi Ronnie Fine, at 5:45. 5:45. That's 5:45. So please join me for some words before Shabbos. For those who it's not Shabbos yet, if it's Shabbos for you, for anybody who's Jewish, so then you can get the recording after Shabbos. So, stay safe, do good, stay away from what we need to stay away from, both physically and spiritually. And again, 5:45, I will be giving a message before Shabbos. I might even include some of what we spoke over here, because it's a beautiful, perfect message as we enter into Shabbos. And if not, again, it's either Rabbi Ronnie Fine on my Facebook page or Chabad ZK, Chabad Zichron Kadeshim. And most importantly, have a good Erev Shabbos, a good Shabbos. What would that be in European time? I don't know. That's daylight saving times. That's New York time, Montreal time, East Coast time. All right. Wishing you a wonderful day, a wonderful good Shabbos to everybody. It should be blessed with all good. The fact that we're going to be with our, small little enclave, it's all good. It's all wonderful. And please share this with others. And don't forget also the 1 minute Tanya Rabbi. Have a wonderful day, a good Shabbos, everybody. Thank you for joining.